Okay, good evening, everyone. We are going to get started momentarily. The webinar is now live. I am going to start the broadcast on Facebook, so bear with me while I do that. We're almost there. Okay, it looks like it's loading. I just want to make sure I'm live on both places and say one message one time. Okay, we are now live on Facebook. I want to welcome everyone to the annual Race in Optometry, Where Are We Now webinar. My name is Betsy Torres. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Associate Director of the Office of Continuing Professional Education. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for joining us tonight. I also like to thank all of our panelists for volunteering their time to participate in this program and to continue the conversation, holding us and our profession accountable for this very important topic. I'd like to just give a few housekeeping notes. This webinar isn't COPE approved or CE broker approved. However, I will be providing participation certificates. They will be sent via email within 2 weeks. We do encourage you all to join the conversation by submitting any comments or remarks in the chat box. But if you have any specific questions that you either want answered or you want to ask directly to a specific panelist, please enter that in the Q&A box and indicate the person's name that you want to direct the question if it is directed to a specific panelist. If you have any questions about CE or this program tonight, please send me an email at ce@sunyop.edu or send me a message via the chat box. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. David Heath, the president of SUNY College of Optometry, who will start the program. Dr. Heath.
Thank you very much, Betsy. And welcome everybody to this seminar, Race in Optometry, Where Are We Now? For those of you who have not participated in the past, this is actually the 5th such webinar. The first 3 followed closely the murder of George Floyd back in the spring of 2020, and really explored or began to have a conversation across the profession as a whole and among our various organizations to really kind of reflect on what optometry as a profession, what our organizations had done, or perhaps more articulately had not done in the past in addressing diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. The first 3, the first one was very much that conversation. The second one looked more at optometric education and what we needed to do and what the challenges were. And the third looked at the professional organizations and industry. But through that conversation, I think a lot of ideas were exchanged, acknowledging the challenges that we have ahead of us, as well as offering some solutions and ideas for the future. It did seem as though certainly our various organizations that are represented on this panel tonight had a sincere commitment and an understanding that we needed to do better, we had to do better, and we had to hold ourselves accountable in the future. So after that third one, I promised that after 1 year, around the Juneteenth holiday, we would have our 4th webinar, which was basically Race in Optometry, accountability, asking the participants of that panel to discuss what progress had been made, to share ideas, and again, explore the challenges and what needed to be done in terms of alternate strategies moving forward. In many ways, in that one, I think there was a lot of feeling that organizations had begun to establish the structures that were needed to begin to focus conversation and to begin to make diversity, equity, and inclusion a greater priority. There were some early programs that were developed to, I think, accelerate the conversation and to bring the forces to bear to address the challenges. But that was after 1 year. This is year 2. We've now had 2 years since this conversation began, and we're continuing our promise to have an annual an annual webinar, an annual meeting, focusing on accountability and transparency on how we are doing as a profession and how our various organizations are proceeding, in terms of improving optometry's history and, more importantly, optometry's future. I do want to acknowledge we've had a lot of participants. We do have a number of new participants, which our moderator will introduce to you shortly. But we've had past participants. I wanted to highlight two, Dr. Deli Shirazian and Dr. Matt Bovenzi, faculty at the SUNY College of Optometry, who actually initiated that first webinar approaching our continuing education department, highlighting how important it was. And based upon the response to that webinar, which was huge, it really was the impetus for us to move forward to make this much more a ongoing part of the profession's conversation. I'd also just note Doctors Andre Stanberry, Daryl Glover, and Andrew Mick, Jackie Bowen, Millie Knight, Derek Artis, and Veronica Schuver, who've appeared on these webinars in the past, and certainly thank them for their contributions. With that, what I would like to do is introduce our moderator, Dr. Joy Harewood. Dr. Harewood actually joined the SUNY College of Optometry in March of 2021 as our Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. And she is an Associate Clinical Professor as well. She's been an incredibly wonderful addition to our community. And if you watched last year's program, she did a wonderful job moderating, and I expect that tonight will go certainly just as well. So sit back, enjoy, participate, let your voice be heard. And Dr. Harewood, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you for that introduction, Dr. Heath, and welcome to everybody in the audience. Good evening. It is with great pleasure that I greet you today for our yearly accounting of our progress towards an equitable, inclusive, and diverse profession. It must be acknowledged that since last year, we've seen our profession grow, with all states being able to prescribe oral medications and historic firsts. As of September 1st of this year, we will have our first Black female Dean of Optometry, Dr. Keisha Elder. Congratulations, Dr. Elder. However, we still have a tremendous amount of work to do. We do continue to see a dearth of Black and other historically excluded individuals in our profession, in our schools, in our leadership at all levels. So we continue the conversation, and that's why we're looking forward to speaking with all these thought leaders today. I'm going to keep my comments brief because I'm really just the vehicle through which they can communicate how they've progressed and what they think that we need to do to move forward collectively. I'll briefly introduce everybody in terms of their bios, and we'll start with Mr. Easy Anyama, who is the president of the American Optometric Students Association. He's also a fourth-year student at the University of Houston College of Optometry. Welcome, Easy. We have Dr. Terry Geist, who's our representative from the American Optometric Association, where she's on the board of trustees. Dr. Geist practices at Midwest Eye Care in Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome, Dr. Geist. We have Dr. Cynthia Hurd, who's here representing the American Academy of Optometry and is the chair of their diversity task force. She's also a professor at Southern College of Optometry. Welcome, Dr. Hurd. We have Dr. E. Larry Jones, who's the president of the National Optometric Association. He's also the owner-operator of Eyes Right Optical in Kent in the state of Washington. Welcome, President and Dr. Jones. We have Dr. Edwin Marshall, who may or may not have been on more of these panels than me. And he is going to give us a grounding, a historical grounding on progress moving forward. He was the Indiana University VP for Diversity, Equity, and Multicultural Affairs. He was also professor of optometry and an adjunct professor in public health. And as I've said before, he's been a stalwart in the push for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the profession. We're very happy to have him again. Welcome, Dr. Marshall. We have newly minted Dr. Chinelo Anyeda, who's the president of the National Optometric Students Association. She recently graduated from Kentucky College of Optometry, and she'll be starting her residency in ocular disease, love ocular disease, at the Huntington VA in Virginia. So welcome. We have Dr. Adam Ramsey, who's one of the co-founders of Black Eye Care Perspective, a group that we all know has been instrumental in raising awareness about the issues facing the Black community in optometry. He's also the CEO, owner, and operator of Socialite Vision in Florida. Welcome, Dr. Ramsey. And last but certainly not least, we have my counterpart on the West Coast, Dr. Ruth Shoge, who's representing the Association of Schools and Colleges of Optometry, where she serves as the chair of Diversity and Cultural Competence, the Diversity and Cultural Competency Committee. Dr. Shogo, as I said before, is also director of DEIB at Berkeley Optometry. So welcome to our panel. We're very thrilled to, for the first time, have student voices and resident voices on our panel. And as a special treat, we will also have the voices of patients, because we cannot forget that our efforts are to make sure that downstream health inequities are hopefully ameliorated and eventually resolved. So with that, I'd like to start with Dr. Marshall. I call upon you to give us an idea of what you think has changed over the years, a global perspective, even farther back than that 1 year that we were initially speaking of. So Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, Dr. Harewood. Let me begin with gratitude to the SUNY College of Optometry and to President David Heath for bold leadership in bringing forth this continuing series of candid conversations around race in optometry. And I might add that in my quick review of the websites of the ASCO institutions, David, you were the only CEO to publish on the school's face page a message about Juneteenth and its significance to your institution's progress toward diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, the Ohio State College of Optometry did post a happy Juneteenth banner on its face page. So Sunday was Juneteenth, a time for self-inquiry and reflection. Over the past 2 years, we have seen a variety of inquiry and reflection with strides towards greater diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the challenges continue, particularly in staying the course with positive movement and defined progress. It wasn't too long ago that I was the only Black full professor of optometry in the United States, and just the second Black optometrist to become a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry. So it's great to see this new consciousness and energy around DEI and the emergence of young Black leaders like Drs. Harewood and Shoge, and the presidents of AOSA and NOSA, not to mention the recent announcement of Dr. Keisha Elder as the next dean at UMSL. So from my perspective, there has been noteworthy change. However, having been involved with this work now for over 5 decades, realizing that optometry does not exist in an environmental vacuum, I must pause as I reflect and paint our progress against a backdrop of seemingly intractable social issues and the toll they bear on the health of our society. But let me provide some additional historical context to this evening's conversation. The AOA-NOA Minority Recruitment Project in 1971 and the NOA Project to increase minority optometric manpower from 1972 to 1980 were the first national organized efforts to address the low diversity of students and practitioners in optometry. During that same timeframe, a number of ASCO institutions were successful in competing for Federal Health Career Opportunity Program, or HCOP, grants to host summer enrichment and our bridge programs for underrepresented minority students. Peak enrollments of URM students during the 1970s and 1980s were greatly facilitated by these AOA, NOA, and HCOP initiatives. The Institute of Medicine reported in 2004 that greater diversity is associated with improved access to care, greater patient choice and satisfaction, better patient-provider communication, and better educational experiences for all students while in training. The ASCO Roadmap for Diversity in Optometric Education and the Profession, also in 2004, set the stage for creating fostering and maintaining a climate that welcomes and embraces diversity in optometric education. The ASCO Diversity Task Force was launched in 2005 to help incorporate diversity and inclusion as core values in the mission, goals, and objectives of ASCO institutions. The 2005-2006 ASCO Diversity Action Plan led to the Diversity Task Force creating the ASCO Guidelines for Culturally Competent Eye and Vision Care in 2008, and the first round of the ASCO Cultural Competence Trainer Workshops in 2009. Fast forward to 2016, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine stated in the landmark report, Making Eye Health a Population Health Imperative, Vision for Tomorrow, that diversity in the eye and vision care workforce is important to address some of the inequities in eye and vision outcomes. And the lack of diversity in the schools and colleges of optometry is a substantial problem. And more recently, and we may hear more about these later, came the emergence of the AOSA Opportunities in Optometry Grant Program, Black Eye Care Perspectives and its 13% Promise and Pre-Optometry Club, and the National Optometric Association Poston Foundation Visioning the Future HBCU Mentorship Program, along with a variety of other collaborations, programs, scholarships, and initiatives. The majority of optometry schools and colleges now reference DEI in their mission statements and or provide standalone DEI statements on their websites. Realizing that we are just 2 years into this newly heightened consciousness, what do the numbers tell us? Looking at the last 2 application, enrollment, and graduation cycles for which data are available, they have been positive gains, albeit modest in most cases, from application to graduation. Looking at just enrollment, the total enrollment of Black students in the last 2 years increased from 3.2% to 4%. The enrollment of Latinx students increased from 7.2 to 7.8%. But more encouraging, the first year enrollment. Over the last 2 years, we see Black first year enrollment grew from 4.1% to 5.5%, and Latinx growing from 8.1 to 8.7. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Equity and inclusion are equally important, if not more so, as drivers of a just environment. So as we continue on with this evening, I now look forward to hearing the other panelists and their assessments of our progress along the DEI journey.
Thank you, Dr. Marshall. And I'm glad that you left it off with students and first-year students, because we are going to hear from our student first. Easy, congratulations on being president of the AOSA. As a current student, how can you say that things have or have not changed? What's your assessment?
Thank you, Dr. Harewood. As a student, I'd say every organization and entity in optometry has become more aware, on high alert, and willing to do something. I'd say that's the major difference. As far as the long-term effects, or if we're really making huge positive change, I think that's still to be determined. As far as the AOSA, we've continued to try to mature the programs we've started. That's the Opportunities in Optometry grant, where 40 students so far have been awarded money to help with registration for optometry school, the Diversified Optometry program, which we do with NOSA. And finally, just internally as an organization, we've kind of disbanded our DEI project team and turned it into more so of a committee, just because we didn't feel like our organization was in a place where DEI could be in an island working on a project. We wanted it to permeate in everything that we do.
Thank you. And if we can move along, since you mentioned NOSA, Dr. Anyama, how would you say things have changed?
Well, NOSA, I mean, the mission statement of NOSA has always been about advancing minority communities. So pretty much what's changed is nothing. We've been doing what we've been doing since the beginning of time. So, I mean, like Easy said, we have the DOT program, Diversifying Optometry program, which helps with getting undergrad students informed about optometry and interested in optometry. Our first event is actually coming up this July, so that's something to look forward to. We also now are doing a collaboration with the AAO with fellowships. So a lot of minorities aren't becoming fellows, and so we're trying to get students that are just graduating or getting close to graduation interested in fellowship after graduation. So we have a seminar today, actually, after this webinar. And we have our mentorship program that we've been doing, matching up doctors of color with students of color and members of NOSA and NOA, so that they can have a person to look to whenever they have questions about optometry in general, or someone that shares their interests in optometry. And lastly, one issue that we noticed as NOSA and the NOA is minority students aren't always performing as well on boards. So we do have a program where we help students that are struggling with passing boards. So those are the things that NOSA has been doing and continues to do and will always do.
It's good to hear. Dr. Shoge, I remember at one of these race and optometry webinars, you said we need to have all hands on deck, very emphatically. Can you say that ASCO's continued to have those hands on deck over the last year?
I would say we've absolutely continued to have all hands on deck, and I've been very proud to be part of and represent this organization. We are still committed to being the academic education leadership organization and putting applicant diversity and faculty education at the forefront of our work. This past year, we've been productive, and ASCO received a $650,000 grant from Johnson & Johnson, and a portion of which is dedicated to helping the DCCC execute several initiatives, including making the cultural competency workshops available on ASCO's new learning management system, creating a speaker series that will be available to all in the field and will include notable speakers with expertise in diversity and inclusion, anti-racism, and health equity. And then the dissemination of the updated cultural competency guidelines, which Dr. Marshall mentioned. He was part of the team that put that out in 2008. So we had a group of people working on that to update the terminology. And so we want to make sure that we get that in the hands of folks who want to use it, and will provide, continue to provide educational guidelines. So those have been very exciting developments just within this past year. And our town hall series continues to go strong. And our next one is actually scheduled for next week, Tuesday, June 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And the topic is social determinants of health and healthcare disparities and optometric perspectives. So if you've not already registered, please be sure to visit ASCO's website, optometriceducation.org. And we have continued to run our cultural competency case studies competition, and the winning case study will be published in the next issue of the Journal of Optometric Education. And then the case studies that we've compiled over the years have been updated and are available also on ASCO's website. So we're very excited to continue this work. And you know, and Dr. Marshall mentioned he was the only Black faculty when he first started, which, you know, I'm grateful for your trailblazing, and that's not something that I have to experience. But, you know, currently we have 30 full-time Black faculty and 46 full-time Hispanic faculty in our schools of colleges in optometry. And through our Future Faculty program, we continue to educate our underrepresented residents in pursuing an academic profession. So we hope through this initiative, along with others, we continue to increase the representation of our faculty each year and expand that pool with each passing year. So those are just some of the things that we have done, particularly in this past year, as well as work that we've been continuing over the years.
Thank you, Dr. Shobe. Now I'll turn things over to Dr. Geis to speak about the AOA. How has AOA been working to move the needle forward?
Well, I know Dr. Marshall and Easy spoke a little bit about one of our big programs, and that's, again, the Opportunities in Optometry grants. And the big thing with that is we decided that we needed to intervene earlier and not wait till they got accepted into optometry school, but to really get the undergraduate population excited about optometry and to give them more information. But we also knew that there were sometimes barriers that we needed to help them overcome. And so again, there were $1,500 grants that help, and I say kids because I'm a mom, help them overcome some of the costs associated with applying to optometry school, as far as taking the OAT and traveling to some of the schools for interviews. And we've actually given out, again, like Easy said, 40 grants at this point. We've received over 63 applications to date, and we continue to see a lot of growth in the awareness and in the applications to this point. And we just want to keep growing that, and we're going to continue to track how these students do as they enter school and how they, the progress that they make, and just really see how we can grow the program and how we can tweak it and make it better year after year. So we're excited about it. And again, AOSA has been fantastic to work with. EssilorLuxottica has partnered with us, and ASCO has been wonderful about helping us communicate to those students in need. And that is also under our the AOA Foundation's foundation umbrella, Optometry Cares, and they've been just essential in helping us get that off the ground too. So that application cycle is open now, and so we just, like I said, we want to keep growing that and making that better and better every year. So we're very proud of that. One of the other things we're doing is that we want to help identify ways that we can continue to build diversity among our volunteer and our leadership structure in AOA. And so including directing our membership committee to explore ways to have more effective recruitment and leadership development of underrepresented minorities within our, like I said, our leadership and membership programs. And so building those future leaders takes time. I think all of us would like to have this fixed yesterday and years and decades past, but we're committed to the effort long term. And we also have a Leadership Development Institute that's currently in its second year. And we've developed a kind of a comprehensive platform that we're actively pursuing qualified young AOA members that we're looking at to help to build that diversity among our volunteer leaders. And so we're looking forward to having that program continue to grow and grow from year to year. So that's currently what we're doing in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Geis. Dr. Hurd, how are things going over at the Academy?
Thank you, Dr. Harewood. The Academy over the last 2 years has been very busy implementing a number of initiatives. This past year, not only did we have a plenary session with Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum as the main speaker, but there were also about 10 courses throughout the courses and workshops at the Academy last year that addressed DEI initiatives, things like from LGBTQ issues, of course, diversity in regards to race, and some other things that definitely need to be on our radar as we encounter people and as we continue to understand other folks' issues so that we can hopefully do a better job of addressing those needs. Other things that we're doing is we are the diversity task force is also working with other committees. We're working with the membership committee, where we are looking at ways to host organizations like the NOA, NOSA, and just individuals of color at some of the meetings, or some of the activities that we have at Academy. And we're always looking for ways to continue to increase that visibility at the Academy. We also are working with the leadership committee. We are making sure that when individuals come in for the leadership courses or leadership program, that the Academy has established that more information about embracing diversity in leadership is also implemented into that leadership program. The admittance committee is one that we're also working with, because we want to establish a mentorship subcommittee where mentors will be paired with mentees and help individuals to gain their fellowship once they decide that they want to apply. And then the final thing I wanted to mention is that we also, this year, last year was not possible because COVID, of course, was still quite visible for us. But this year, we're inviting high school students to the Academy, where we want to plan, we're planning a lunch for them. And we also are going to expose them to optometry. These are individuals from high schools in the city in which the Academy will be.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Jones, can you speak to how the NOA has continued to raise awareness and move things forward?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Harewood. We are the NOA. Thank you, by the way, for Dr. Marshall and all the things that everyone's been doing to supplement and uplift what our whole tasks are that we're doing here. It's interesting looking at the goals that we all have and making sure that we're kind of, touching bases on on the different levels. We know that that we have a great HBCU program right now that's increased from 10 to 14 from last year. So I'll give you kind of the things that have changed. Our NBEO program for the doctors that graduate from optometry school that can't practice now, we actually have a program to help them move on through the boards. We have Dr. Cohen, Dr. Pepper. We have some awesome doctors behind us helping us with these things. And we've heard mention of the DOP program, and NOSA and AOSA together working in tandem. They have that DOP program headed off by Dr. Shannon. Dr. Dana Shannon has over 100 registrants now, which is awesome this year. We're continuing to advocate for children's vision on the Achieve program that was spearheaded by Dr. Marshall and a lot of the NOA members. We've got last year, I think we gave away $85,000 worth of scholarships, and this year I think we'll be close to 1,000, or I'm sorry, 100,000. And so we're looking forward to that in Anaheim this year in July from the 8th to the 10th, and everyone's invited to that. The neat thing that's happened, I think, above and beyond that is the things that we do from our different associations and how we've been able to kind of come together. We're stronger together, and that's the most important thing we have to remember. It's neat, the AOA board, and Dr. Geis will tell you, I've talked to him all by myself like 3 times, and every time I talk to him, I make sure we talk about people of color coming on their board. I make sure I speak about, the things that we're doing to be better allies together. And I've always made sure that I'm working toward those things, and we're doing it in a great way. And the AOA has been very open, which I'm so excited about them opening up and actually creating that DEA and all the things that their DEI group and working with the NOA as a liaison. I spoke to ARBO, which was good. For the first time in 100 years, we had a meeting with ARBO. ASCO meeting, we were invited and spoke with ASCO, and thank you, Dr. Shoge, for all the things that you're doing with ASCO right now. We know that ASCO's goals that were created in your meetings, the goal to encourage the schools to do more diversity is happening. So all those things that you are actually pushing forward is working. And so I'm so proud of you, Dr. Shoge, for those things that you're doing there. We have now a NOA member going to the ACOE and we're going to make sure that there's cultural competency education in all schools that's integrated now. So we have a member, an NOA member going into that. So we're making sure that that's one of the goals. And then we as the NOA reward schools. We're giving awards out to schools that do those things, and we're thanking them. So those are things that we're very, very thankful for. Obviously, hearing from Dr. Shoge again that there is an increase of faculty, which is awesome. So I think all of these things that are mounting up. One of the other really neat things is that we have a leadership meeting, which is it's a laid back meeting where the leaders of the academy, the leaders of ASCO, the leaders of NBEO, the leaders of the AOA, the leaders of ARBO, and sit and talk together about things that are happening. We had a wonderful meeting in February in Black History Month, and it was very productive. So I think that all of the things that are happening right now are really, really positive. Again, all of you who were alive in the 60s and know when March on Selma, all the things that happened, when we know that when the civil rights came about, people came out and started hiring people and making people deans and doing this and that. And then a lot of those people kind of dropped out. So I think this is a time where we're keeping each other accountable, making sure that this is going to keep on happening and it's not going to drop off the radar like it did basically in the 60s. And so we're hoping that this come around of Black Lives Matter and all of the things that we're looking at, George Floyd's death, all the things that are happening are going to keep going and keep moving and keep pushing people to understand that this is a problem. We have to fix it. And I'm thankful for everyone on this panel.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Last but definitely not least, Dr. Ramsey, what do you have to say? How have you seen things change from the Black eye care perspective?
Thank you, Dr. Harewood. I really appreciate it. Like everybody said, there's been momentum. There's been things happening in the past year. So I commend all the organizations for standing up and doing something. At Black Eye Care Perspective, our goal is to redefine the color of the eye care industry 1% at a time. And when we hear that, the students have went from 3% to 4%, when they've been at 3% for the past 15 years before we started all this momentum, that's all we wanted, was to get some positive momentum. Next year, our goal is 5%. The year after that is 6%. When we started the 13% promise and we put that out there, it wasn't saying they were going from 3 to 13% in 1 year. Some people got scared off by that, but you have to have a goal. You have to have an endpoint. You have to have something to hold people accountable to say, hey, where do you want to go with it? And to go up 1%, I'm happy. The work is getting done. Next year, let's get to 5% and let's keep it going. In the past year, we started a lot of new initiatives. One that we launched a few months ago, which was a Black eye doctor locator. We've had so many patients reach out and ask, I want to find a Black provider in my area. I don't know where they are. Or companies saying, I want to support, or I want to help, or students saying, I want to shadow somebody that looks like me. And we had to do a lot of scrambling to try and find somebody in those areas. So we said, how about we just put together a locator, where people can find providers in their area. We've had thousands of hits on that Black Eye Doctor locator in which patients will be able to connect. We've been able to drive traffic to the doctor's practices, and that's been really good. And it's allowed us to get students opportunities to shadow and connect with providers that are in their area. I've had students that went to go visit their grandparents and they just found a doctor in the area to go shadow and connect with on a weekend kind of thing. So it's been really good in that regard. What we launched a few days ago on Juneteenth was a support Black eyewear initiative. So we're trying to help eye care from the beginning to the end. So we have some Black eyewear brands that are on our website now, some that are owned and operated by optometrists themselves. And we're able to drive traffic because some people say, okay, well, maybe there's not a Black provider in your area, but maybe you have a Black eyewear brand that you can then purchase and support. And even if you are, you can't find a Black provider in your area, maybe you can rock some cool eyewear that are made for minorities, designed by minorities, that are going to fit you appropriately, that are going to work with your style, your facial features, all of that stuff. So we've been working on those initiatives. And in the past year, we've really robustly worked on our 13% promise and had a lot more connection and engagement with the 13% promise from industry, from schools, from more colleges. And that is an accountability feature. That is saying, people raising their hands saying, hey, we're not perfect, but we want to get better, and can you help us? And we've been amazed at having so many companies that are raising their hands saying, hey, we want to sign on to the 13% promise. We want to do better. We want to support the initiatives that you guys are putting out. And it's been quite amazing to see that support, and that it's not dying off. It's continuing to go. It's going to go forward, and we're actually doing better and doing more. Literally had 2 calls this week that I can't wait to be able to share upcoming with some big companies that are signing on to the 13% promise. So it's not going away. It wasn't a whim. It wasn't a one-time flash in the pan. We're still actually moving forward and doing more, and that's what I'm super proud to be a part of, and to continue to do that work.
Thanks, Dr. Ramsey. Now, as I think towards all the gains that have been made and how proud we are of these gains, we realize that these gains are made within a structure that has historically excluded many people. The question is, do we believe that the gains that have been made have been embedded in the structure of your organizations? And if not, what do we need to do to make that happen? And I leave that open to anybody on the panel. But if I don't have any volunteers, I'm going to call on Dr. Shoge to start us off.
I can volunteer. So I think it just goes back to our enrollment in optometry school, right? So the majority of optometrists were not people of color for years and years and years. So, it's kind of a step process. You can't just become a dean overnight, right? You have to be an optometrist, work in education, and then make your way up to becoming a dean. So when we get more people of color enrolled into optometry school and then get them into education, become professors, then we can have more people of color that become deans of optometry schools. So it's just like Dr. Ramsey said, 1% at a time, right? So step by step, we'll get there. And I think, with Dr. Elder becoming the dean of UMSL, we're getting there.
And I
Go
take
ahead,
a
Easy.
slightly different look, but say the same thing. For the AOSA, it's cultural for us. If it's going to be embedded and last a long time, it has to be cultural, and that's shared behavior amongst a group. And so I think that for us to have it embedded, one, the leadership of our org, and probably every org here, has to spread the culture where it's a shared responsibility. And that, I think, adds to the other angle where 1% of the time, the right people will be there, but now the opportunities will match those people. And no one will feel like they have to go above and beyond to place that person in the position that they deserve to be in.
Thank you. And if anyone else wants to comment, Dr. Shoge or anyone else, it's completely open to you, the question.
I love Easy's very simple definition of culture, the shared behaviors in a group, which is essentially what it is. And I think pushing for cultural change is what is needed within organizations as well as across organizations. And I think I become most encouraged and I feel more work is getting done is when organizations are working with each other to further the cause versus in silos, because you just get more work done with more hands involved. It's really just simple math. And I think, for, in terms of ASCO embedding our gains, I think when you have a group of people who are just simply passionate, and everybody who serves on DCCC is passionate to be there and to do the work that's necessary. And I think if we just continue to pass the baton to, the next group of folks who are coming in, who share that same passion and same energy, and maybe have a little bit more energy that you have with them coming in as you're leaving, I think that's what helps to continue the momentum and make sure these gains are not just one and dones. Because I think that's what, hurts my soul, is you put so much effort and work in for it to be a one-time situation. And that's absolutely not what I'm doing this work for. It's for it to be permanent. It is for it to be a change, so much so that we don't even have to have these conversations anymore. It's just a natural state of our being as a profession. And so that's what embedded gain looks like to me.
I couldn't agree more, but continue, Dr. Ramsey.
All right, so when you ask if this change that's happened is going to continue, I would say it depends on their why, because we've had a lot of people do a lot of stuff in the last couple of years, which is great. Everybody's done something. But the question I would ask them is, why did you do it in the first place? Because if your why is good enough, you will continue it. Because if it's embedded in your organization, in the structure, in the mission, in the vision of your organization as a whole, then even if the leader leaves from one school and flies all the way across the country to another school, we're going to leave names out. If the work is still going to be done because it's embedded in your organization, it shouldn't drop off because it's a part of your mission statement. It isn't that you have one person that's a champion for it and they bring it up at every single meeting and they have to be the scapegoat and the person that gets the arrows thrown at them for what they say and what they do. It's a part of the organization. I give you an example. We've had companies reach out to us at BP and say, hey, we want to sign a 13% promise. So that's my baby. So you got to come talk to me, right? And I asked them, why do you want to sign it? Oh, no, we just believe it's a really good thing. It's really positive. Okay, but what about your company says, and I would go and look and say that you believe in X, Y, and Z, and they have nothing. I said, well, you don't sign it just to sign it. This is not for marketing. It's not for publicity. This has to be something that you believe in, that you want to do. And a lot of them can't come back with a why. They just want to sign it for marketing and branding and to put a sticker up for Juneteenth. And they call us the week before and like, hey, can we do it this week? A couple of days before, that's not what we're doing here. This is about the real work. This is about rolling your sleeves up and saying, okay, let's put a mirror up to what we're doing and saying we need to do better and hold ourselves accountable. So the only way this stuff that's going on right now will continue is if the why the companies, organizations, schools, industry is doing it, if their why is accurate. And if their why is embedded into the vision and the mission of that organization, then no matter if the champion leaves, if no matter we stop talking about it, if we don't have any more webinars anymore, it will still continue because it's what they want to do as an organization, not from a leader or a champion that's within that organization pushing it and bringing it up every meeting and every year. So I would say it depends on the why.
No, and I think that leads also into another question when it comes to leadership. As the years have gone by, there have been more people of color, more Black and brown folks who have gotten leadership positions, but also more who have been sought to take on some of these DEI roles. A lot of the time it's, Black or racialized folks who are at the forefront of these committees, task forces, and these organizations. That means the people at the forefront are also directly affected and could benefit from the work. So how do we negotiate that when it comes to accountability? Do we then put the accountability on the same people who may have been historically excluded? And I leave that up to anybody to answer. But if nobody's there yet, I'll ask Dr. Hurd if you have any commentary on that.
Can you repeat your question again? I didn't hear the very last part of it.
Sure. The question is the fact that there are more Black and brown folks in leadership roles, or also in roles that are specifically trying to increase diversity and equity within the profession. Does that mean that the people who have been historically excluded and are really trying to get in now become accountable to make this change? And if so, how do we share that load?
I believe we can share that load by setting expectations. I think it's really important that once you are put in a position of power, you need to represent what you say you're going to represent. I think also it's really important when you are looking at individuals that you want to see represent people of color, but they may not be people of color. Hence, they may be allies, and we constantly need allies. We need them more and more and more. So the thing I think that we really have to do is we have to figure out how to get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations. I am not necessarily one to mince words when it comes to things that are important to me. And like Dr. Ramsey said, I am going to be that voice who pops up every time there's a question about this, that, or the other. And it's important to have those individuals there. And I think one person who was really good at making sure that people really felt uncomfortable when he wanted them to be accountable was Dr. C. Clayton Powell. Dr. Powell was no joke. He was an individual who, when you came to the NOA convention, it doesn't matter if he's ever seen you or not. You are there apparently for some reason. And he wants you to understand that the NOA is here to increase minority numbers, particularly among Black optometrists, and either you're going to put up or shut up. And that's just how he was about that kind of thing. And I totally appreciated that view. And sometimes we need people who are just kind of out there to represent us, because there are going to be lots of times when individuals don't necessarily want to hear what you have to say. Or they may say, well, I'll listen to you this time, but then they never call you back. They never email you, whatever. You can't really ignore somebody like Dr. Powell. And I think it's just really important that we kind of channel him when we really, really need people to understand what we're trying to say and what our views are, and that we're not going to go away.
Agreed. Dr. Marshall, do you have anything to add on to that?
Well, I'm glad Dr. Hurd brought up Dr. Powell. I mean, I think he was a person who did not take no for an answer. Very aggressive. He called people to task, including the AOA. I mean, I can recall some interesting conversations that he had with the leaders of the AOA back in the day, calling for what he referred to as a soul injection. The profession needed soul injection is what he would constantly say. But no, I think, having fought some of these battles early on, when there were no other people for me to look around and help, brace me up. You had to kind of go it alone, and you had to kind of toughen the skin and keep fighting that good fight. And eventually, every now and then, you have a breakthrough, and you would bring someone else along, and began to develop momentum along the process. And today, for example, I think one of the differences today than in the past, and we've walked this path before, is that having this sort of collaborative conversation. This is relatively new. I mean, in the past, sure, we had the NOA doing something. We may have had the AOA doing something. We may have had ASCO doing something. But we never kind of sat around as a collective within the profession to talk about how we can mutually work together towards a common goal. In fact, we never even defined a common goal. So I think, Dr. Ramsey's 13% promise, I think that helps put a goal out there. And it may not be the only goal, but at least it's a goal that we can kind of point to. So having the opportunity to interact and talk about what it is that each of us can do from not only the perspective of our respective organizations, but also as individuals, because we are also individuals, and each of us can impact someone else along the way. So we have to keep telling the story, keep fighting the good fight. And again, I go back to Dr. Heath, having this sort of conversation every year. I have to applaud him for that, because this is the first within the profession, as far as I know, that we've all sat around the same table talking about the same thing, trying to strive for a common goal. So I'm encouraged that he will continue this in the path and in the future, but also that we'll bring others along the way, bringing industry into this, because obviously industry has a resource that many of the organizations may not have. So they have a role to play. Having people within the boardrooms who make decisions about who appears in the media, so that future optometrists can see themselves in some of the ads that appear in the magazines and on TV. All that's part of the overall effort that needs to be in place. It's not one monolithic sort of path we need to take. It has to be across the board in every aspect of the profession. So again, I think continuing this conversation, moving 1%, 2% at a time, whatever we can do, we continue to make progress. We didn't have this many black and brown faces around, when I first started in the profession. And to see that now, and to see people like Easy, like Janello, coming up through the ranks, future leaders, it gives me hope and gives me promise.
Dr. Geist, I see that you're unmuted. You want to comment?
Just very, very small. And obviously this is a little bit of an intimidating audience and among panelists for me, but we were at a board meeting at one point, and I thought this was very telling, and I don't want to misquote. So Verna Myers, she made the comment, or our speaker had said that her quote was, diversity is being invited to the party. You probably have all heard this. Diversity is being invited to the party, and inclusion is being asked to the dance, or asked to dance. And I think that we all have been in that situation, whether it's about race, sex, gender, whatever it is. And I hope at the end of the day that we can all say that we've been asked to dance, and all be kind and walk in each other's shoes and all of those things. And I hope for all of you that at the end of the day, that's something that we can accomplish, and for future generations, and not just generations, for the next couple of years and decades and all of that, that we will have walked away from all of these conversations and continue to have dialogue to make such a positive impact, and continue to have a positive impact, that we, again, really don't have to have these conversations anymore, that it's just given and it's ingrained in all of us. So that's all.
Dr. Ramsey?
Yeah, so Dr. Harwood, your initial question, and I just want to make sure I'm getting this right, was that, you know, in the past couple of years, we've had quite a few people get D&I positions. We've had quite a few people be put into different roles, and mainly people of color in those roles. And is it fair to put the brunt of all of the work on them? I'm hoping I'm getting your question correct from the beginning. And that's tricky because we've asked for those people, we've asked for those positions, right? But I give you an example. Me and my wife have this discussion all the time. She seasons the meat and I grill it. So then when the food comes out good, I say, didn't I do a good job cooking the food? And she says, well, you didn't season it, so it doesn't count. You didn't cook it. I said, but I grilled it. I made sure the temperature, everything's right. She says, no, unless you do it from start to finish, you don't get to take credit for it. And what I'm seeing and what my concern is with some of the people in these positions, when I look at and I ask behind the scenes, behind the doors, is, are you allowed to season the meat and cook it? Or are you being asked to only cook the food? Because if I put a person of color in a position, but I give them no authority, I give them no budget, I give them no bandwidth, and I say, make something out of nothing. And 2 years later, nothing happens. You say, see, we tried that experiment, it did not work. Well, did we try the experiment? Or did we put a person in a position with no authority, with no bandwidth, with no ability to do anything and expect them to make something out of nothing? So I'm happy for the people getting the positions, but I think it goes back to the why, which is why I hold everybody accountable when they're doing something. They say, well, why did you hire him? And why did you hire her? And why did you create the position? Because I know a lot of educators that are being asked to do D&I for the whole school and to educate every single student and every single provider. But yet, if they ask for $10,000 to do this program, it has to get approved by people that may not have the same why. It has to go through a chain of command that may not have the same mission, may not have the same vision. So my answer to you is, I'm happy that the positions are being created. My challenge to the people that are creating the positions is to give them the tools to actually be able to execute what you're asking them to do. And then it would be fair to hold them accountable to a standard. But if we are behind the 8 ball for 100 years and 200 years, how much more energy, effort, and finances and accountability and resources are going to be needed to move that boulder out of the way? You're going to have to give these people a longer rope. You know, if you try to reach a student in high school, it is 5 years before they can apply to optometry school. So how much rope, and that's a senior in high school. So how much bandwidth do you have to give these people in these positions? How much resources is it going to take to actually be able to do that? So I'm happy for the positions. I would love to see more resources and more bandwidth and leverage that those people can have in those positions where they can actually be held accountable for what they're asking to do in those roles. It is a start, but I think sometimes how it's being done may need to be tweaked or adjusted to actually be able to execute what they're looking for from those positions.
If I may add to that, I think that's great, but also that person has to be fully integrated, I believe, in the operation of the institution. Anytime I've been asked for advice, having been a university vice president with responsibility in DEI, I've been asked occasionally, what should I expect? What should I ask for? I've always said a cabinet level position, at the level of the dean or the president, because not everything will look like it's DEI, but it may be. So there are aspects of the institution that can affect diversity, equity, and inclusion, but may not necessarily be in that particular box at that moment in time. So being around that table to be able to talk about the largesse of the school and its operation, and when appropriate, to bring up issues that are particularly relevant to the DEI initiative. So having the authority, having the power, and also having someone, having the dean have your back when you make hard decisions, because as we know, DEI is not an easy job. And sometimes you have to make very, very difficult decisions. And sometimes those decisions are not very, very popular. So to have the administration support you in this and have that upfront understood, so that you know what you can expect as you move, as you attempt to move a stronger DEI agenda.
As we move forward, does anyone from the work that's been done or being done have any other lessons, anything that they've learned that has helped them to do the work better in the future? And let's hear from Dr. Jones first.
So I think just standing on the shoulders of the men and women who fought, behind us, I think is where I've learned. I've watched them fight. I've watched what they do, and just learning from, mistakes and what's happened. I think those are things that I see, even in my own family. My dad in the 60s was given a deanship at University of Washington as a professor. And a year later, they demoted him. And he was actually one of the top producing faculty members there. He wrote over 12 books and taught Black history. And then it was taken away from him, basically, and never given tenure. So you get these positions and you got to watch out, just as Dr. Ramsey was saying, and then Dr. Marshall, get to those positions that you're stable and you're steady, and they're ones where you have control to actually help and do more. So I'm really thankful that we're able to see that happen right now. We're moving up into different positions. We're seeing people actually taking positions of authority in the C-suites now. We have at Essilor, Dr. Knight, we have, all the different Dr. Artists they've raised up, Dr. Terrence Ingraham, who was at J&J first, kind of a trailblazer, all good friends of mine that I see and watch and see where industry's going and where optometry is going. And hopefully we can take those things that have happened in the past and not make the same mistakes, ally ourselves again with the correct allies and people that are going to be with us for real, and then move on in that position. I'm not sure if that's kind of what you were asking.
Yeah, that definitely moves in the right direction. Does anyone else have any lessons learned, maybe Easy or Dr. Shoge?
Yeah, I'd say a lesson learned, even from my leadership position now, is just cooperation. Yes, in communication, but also in action. Optometry is way too small for 11 orgs to do 11 of the same thing, with a little bit of a difference. And so every time each of us can collaborate, we all provide something new. All of our mission statements are different, but they all have that same outcome, which is honestly great patient experience. And DEI is necessary for that. I think that's understood across the board so far. But I think just collaborating is what I've learned. So even moving forward with the AOSA, we really want to work with every organization we can and not reinvent the wheel or do some of the same things twice.
Dr. Anyeda?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I don't know if you can hear me. I was going to say the same thing, just like with the DOT program specifically. We were working on that for a year and weren't making as much progress until we collaborated with the AOSA. So collaboration is so important. Like Easy said, just everybody has the same mission. So we should all be working together to accomplish it.
Dr. Shoge, did you also want to comment?
Yeah, I would say an important lesson that I continue to learn, because it's not quite sinking in, is to pace yourself. This is definitely a marathon and not a sprint. And to say no when you need to say no, because everybody has an idea and they think their idea is the best idea. And And, you know, part of what I'm learning is to hold on to my why, as Dr. Ramsey said, and to make sure that I have the time, space, and resources to execute the initiatives around the why. And it's very easy to get away from that and to try to please a lot of different people in this work. And that just, it leads to burnout, you know, and I think that's a real thing. And part of what we do as, you know, you and I, Joy, in the space, meeting regularly just to support one another. And I think if you can find those people who can hold you up, you know, I'm sure Dr. Elder knows she has a whole team of people who are here to support her and to help her protect her time. And remind her she's dean and she don't need to do some things anymore, right? Because that's not part of her priority. And so I think for me is pacing yourself and surrounding yourself with people who will continue to support and lift you is important. And to sometimes say no.
So most people have mentioned the collective, how much better we are when we work together in these conversations and meetings and discussions are important. Is there anything that you think we should collectively be focusing our energies on, whether that be increasing numbers or increasing equity or the patient experience? Is there anything in particular we can collectively work towards as different organizations together?
I'd say for a prospective student, letting them know what is available to them currently and in the future, even beyond graduating and becoming a doctor. Letting them know early, letting them know that there's always someone to turn to, always a doctor who's looking out for you. I think we can all contribute to that, even today.
Couldn't have said it better. Dr. Hurd?
Thank you. I definitely agree with Easy. It's really important to just really, I think, walk the walk and not just talk the talk, because people are watching you. They are looking to see not only what you're saying, but what are you doing? I also think it's really important, and it would be great if we could figure out a way to consistently expose children to optometry, expose middle schoolers, high schoolers on a routine basis, like some of the other professions do, and create a pipeline at even a deeper level, because it's really going to take something like that in order for individuals to decide, or there to be enough individuals, a critical mass of individuals who decide once they want to go to college that they want to go to optometry school. Because the story goes so many times that individuals who are interested in the health professions, they think about dentistry, medicine, and nursing, probably the majority of the time, until they happen to be exposed to optometry. I don't want the happen to be the standard. I want people to be exposed to optometry as early and as often as possible. And I say that from a place deep in my own heart, because when I was 13 years old, I went to the optometrist for the very first time. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. So the optometrist was a white gentleman, and I had in my mind, I had nothing in common with this man. But when he started to examine me, he asked me questions about my perception, because, you know, that's what we do to come up with my prescription. And it's like I had a really interesting experience where I thought, maybe I could do this. And I'd never had a thought like that about anything else. And so once I got older, and as people ask you, once you go to high school, so what are you going to do when you grow up? I said, I'm going to become an optometrist. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So before I even went to college, I knew I wanted to be an optometrist. And once I went to college, I kind of blew off all the party stuff. I went to Jackson State University. It was considered a big time party school. I'm not a party girl. I am serious about everything I do. And so I went to college and I was like, okay, I know I got to make the grades. I know I got to get the experience however I can, especially, you know, doing research, all the ancillary things that really help you grow as an individual and be more well-rounded. So once I did those things, it really became something that I could hang my hat on when I went to apply for optometry school. And I did get accepted at all the schools that I applied to. And I chose the one that I thought I was least likely to choose, which was Ohio State. And that was an excellent decision on my part because I became the type of optometrist that I wanted to be. And now I get to teach students 30 years later. Now I get to instruct students and put a little bit of myself into them. And it is wonderful because I even have individuals come back to me. I may see them at meetings, like at Optometry's meeting last week, and they will come up to me and say something to me that might have happened 20 years ago. And I'm like, so what did I say to you? And they'll tell me, and I'm like, wow, that was a great moment. And it's something that encouraged them when they really needed to be encouraged. So we got to grow deeper.
Dr. Ramsey, do you have any suggestions or thoughts on what we can collectively work towards?
You know, when we have these calls, we always mention working together. And I think the question comes is, what does working together look like? Because too many chiefs, not enough Indians is not good either, right? Somebody has to lead and somebody has to follow. So when all these organizations that do different missions and do different things, we're all talking about eye care, but it's going at it from a different perspective. I think we need to look at it and say, who's the leader and who's following? And then look at it and say, what can I do better than you can? And let me do that part. Because we all shouldn't be doing the same thing, right? We all shouldn't have the same message. You know, we have different things that are going out trying to reach students. But if it's the same message of eye care is easy, you can do it part-time, it's the profession that you can have work-life balance, that wouldn't reach me. So that wouldn't be what I look for. I got 12 jobs. So that wouldn't be something that would entice me to want to come in here and do it, right? So we need to work together, but we don't need to do the same thing. So I think sometimes when people say, let's work together, they're like, okay, you take my workload. No. You do your work, I do my work. We can work together in the same mission, which is diversifying eye care, but we don't have to do the same thing. We need to be on the same page and move in the same direction, but we all need to have our own flavor and have our own way about doing it, because we'll reach different students. You will reach somebody that I can't reach, and I will reach somebody that you can't reach. And sometimes we need to work together, but we need to decide on who's running the ship and who's steering the boat. And then whoever that person is, we need to actually follow and lead and say, okay, if you're in charge, give us marching orders. And I think that's the part that's missing from these talks and these conversations. You know, it's like when somebody walks up to you and say, hey, how you doing? He said, I'm good. I'm blessed and highly favored. Okay. But if you stop and say, no, I'm not good today. I'm having a rough day. Are we willing to then say, okay, this is what we're going to do? Because we all say we want to work together. But if we were to call and say, okay, this is what we need you, I need you to do this, and you need to do that. But everybody's like, I don't know about that. I want to do it this way, and I want to do it that way. Then are we working together? I think we have to all look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what does working together mean? What am I willing to sacrifice? What am I willing to give up? How much am I willing to hold myself accountable? How much am I willing to say, I won't get what I want and I can't do it the way I want? Because whoever we decide is leading the ship gets to go. And whoever is leading the ship, that's not the easiest thing. Somebody might say that's the hardest one, because the one leading the ship is the most accountable. But everybody else has to actually follow and lead the person. But do we have anybody that wants to actually lead the ship? And do we have enough crew members that want to listen to the person that leads? You know, we've been on these calls, you know, and I'm usually the one poking the bear, and I'm usually the one saying something. And I don't mind that because can't nobody fire me, so I can say what I want. But I really feel like that's the part that's missing sometimes from these conversations is the follow-up. You know, I'm really happy with SUNY having this conversation 3 years in a row. But when they emailed me and said we were doing this again, I was like, wow, and it's been 12 months. It seemed like I just was yelling the other day. Like, this can't be. It's been 12 months. It can't be. And I look back and I'm like, no, it really has been 12 months. But if you look at it and say, okay, if we've been 12 months and last time we said, let's work together. 12 months later, are we working together? We're working as individuals. So either we have to say, we're going to work together and let's do it, or stop saying we're going to work together. And you do what you do and I do what I do. But we have to make a decision and figure out how we're going to do that. And that's just me talking broadly, not just the people on this call, industry as a whole, because we use a lot of talking points. People say a lot of stuff at meetings and they get up on stages and PowerPoints and all the other stuff that you say, and look at this and look at that. But when you come off the stage, what are we actually doing? Like, who is willing to do that? And most people, most groups, most organizations either don't want to be the leader and also don't want to follow somebody else, because the leader got to be held accountable and the follower doesn't get to do what you want to do. So that's the tough part for me for this. I like the question, I like it, but I would love anybody that's watching this later on go back and say, am I willing to be the leader or am I willing to be the follower? But you got to answer one of the two. You can't walk away with both. And I think most people and most organizations can't answer that question. So we can't never do that. So it's just a good talking point to say, we need to work together. Okay, are you leading or following? And I'm willing and able to do either one, but I would love to know what we're doing.
I would say, to take that further, what would collaborating or a good coordination of efforts look like? What would that be? Has that ever happened? Dr. Marshall, you had said previously that this type of coming together, you haven't seen it happen before. But if anybody has any historical memory, have you ever seen a really good and successful collaboration happen amongst optometric organizations towards a common goal, whether or not it be DEI? And I leave that up to anyone to comment on.
You know, I think
Dr.
we
Marshall?
see collaboration within the profession and other venues. You know, the state boards get together, the state associations get together, you know, so there are collaborations, interactions. So why can't we have a similar sort of interaction, you know, around DEI? And I think trying to figure out, as Dr. Ramsey said, who does what best and what fits in what peg. But we got to first figure out what are the boxes that we need to fill. I think, you know, we'll focus on numbers. We've talked about the inclusion, but, you know, what does inclusion look like? How do you gauge inclusion? You know, and the fact that inclusion has to be intentional. How do we actualize that into some sort of collective effort? I think we need to kind of do a better job of drilling down and deciding, you know, what is it that needs to be done to accomplish, you know, the ultimate goal, and then who can best fit, you know, that as we move along. If I may real quickly come back to Dr. Ramsey's why question. As a collective, I think one thing we can do as a collective is try to educate those individuals who don't understand why, educate them of the why. And I think if we can do a better job of doing that, we can get more people to understand the why, then I think our job will be a lot less challenging going forward.
Dr. Geis, how do you feel as though the AOA can fit into a collective purpose or help fit to move things forward in terms of what the AOA does best?
Well, I think we have a really large voice. And I think that, you know, one of the things, I was the chair of communications for about 8 to 9 years as on the volunteer structure. And I think that, one thing, again, sometimes I think it's frustrating when we just can't get things done, and repetitive messaging, I think is very important. And I think that's one thing where sometimes it's frustrating when we feel like we're saying the same thing over and over and people aren't listening. And I think that is something that we have to keep because there's different platforms now. There's, social media, and not everybody reads print like back in the simpler times, as my children say. And so I think getting that message out to, again, students and people my age and all the different age demographics as far as what we need to do to move the needle. Not just the students. I mean, this isn't just a message that we need, in my opinion, that we need to get out to students. It's a message we need to get out to everyone. This isn't something that we just need to educate that age group. This is something that we need to get out to lots of people. So I feel like we have that platform that we can help spread that message, and just really help in that way, hopefully, and help that collaboration. Just because I think we have a fairly, I have a loud voice, but I think that the AOA has a really loud and wide voice that we can help with that.
Yeah, and just to circle back on Dr. Ramsey's point, I do think that there has been difficulty in working together, but I think even more so, it's probably, in my opinion, from a confusion of the why. I think people since the beginning of time have mobilized to go to the moon, build huge pyramids, do all types of things, all behind the purpose or why that's unified, clear, and people are passionate about. So I think it's possible. I think that whether we have a leadership system or we just operate within our own network, and the AOSA say we're the voice of the students, and if you do something that involves a student, you tag along and we work together. I think that's one aspect. But I do think that we should all be very optimistic that we can work together. It's just a matter of doing it. Whether you feel like we can or you can't, we just try it and we make it happen. That's how I feel about it.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to add one more thing. And poor Easy has to talk to the AOA board more than he ever wants to. And like Larry mentioned, we've been in person about 3 times, I think, in the last year. And ASCO we've met with several times in the last year, one-on-one in person. And so we've done those small things with smaller groups, but absolutely, could we improve on that? Could all of us improve on that? Yes. So I think that that's something that we can certainly all get better, but I agree, the why and what are we trying to achieve, and have a set agenda and be a little bit more structured. Yes, I think that we could do better there.
Is there anything different, or maybe novel or new, that you're thinking to implement in the coming year that will help to enhance diversity and try to promote equity and inclusion within your own institutions? And I leave that up to anybody.
Well, I kind of led up to it earlier, but we kind of want, and we're going to work with NOSA and their new EC coming in as well, to make DOP a program that everyone can be seen on, and every org can kind of represent at webinars and say what you do and say how you will add value to a student and help them throughout their career. Additionally, organizations like ASCO offer free materials about optometry, and you can apply for them and they'll send you things. So trying to find ways to get students to get those things, and if you're passionate about it, give you everything you need to do to go and promote optometry. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. And that's kind of how we could collaborate and work together.
Dr. Jones, Dr. Shoge, Dr. Ramsey?
We're at the NOA working on, we found that there's a disconnect between the students that come out of optometry school matriculating into the NOA or into an area where they can have impact on society where it is for optometry. So we're working on ways of creating a relationship with those students that we give awards to. If we give $100,000 out, we want to encourage those young people to actually step into a position in the NOA. We want to see if they'll be on a committee. We want to see if they can do something. And as we grow and build, this year we have multiple people who are in DEA positions. I actually wanted to create another part of the NOA who helps out with DEA problems or DEI problems. And so I think that those things are happening as we go, but I really do see that when people see how much work it is, they struggle with that. I think that when people see how hard volunteers and how hard it is to push that snowball uphill of race and push that, and keep working on it over and over again. And when the snowball falls backwards on you and you lose that momentum, and it's just one day at a time again. And as we work on those things, and a lot of us don't get paid, we just do it. That's all we do. And again, like Adam said, you got 12 jobs. And I think I do have 12 jobs. And it's interesting, and most of them we don't get paid for. So, and I think that getting people to stand up and become leaders in this area is something that we really have to work on. And I'm so glad that I see AOA has that leadership program that they started, and I see they have a Black optometrist that's in that, and hopefully matriculating into the trustee position in the AOA. I see all these things happening. I want to make sure that we maintain them. Everyone is welcome to be in the NOA, whether you're Black, white, orange, it doesn't matter. We've had Latino presidents. We've had any races available. So and people just think you have to be Black to be in the NOA. And I think that is a barrier for some people. And you don't have to. I always tell people, my mom is white. My mom's Irish and English. And so, and my dad is Native American and Black. So my white half of me doesn't say you can't be in the NOA. And so when we look at these things and we look at leadership and we look at the struggle, we have to know that there is got to be a fight. There's got to be a little bit of fight left in the dog. Doesn't matter the size of the dog, but we have to put some fight in him, and we need to stand up. And a lot of us don't. I have another whole year of being the president of the NOA. There's a lot more things I want to do. I just kind of ramped into it with Dr. Reynolds teaching me a lot of the things I'm learning. And now I'm going to stand up and create some new programs. I hope that we'll do this year. So I'm starting to get my sea legs. It takes a lot when you're working on, on different areas. Again, with 12 jobs, it's the same thing. So anyway, I think that that's something that we really need to work on, is just getting leaders to stand up, getting people of color to be leaders and volunteer.
How do we hold organizations and ourselves accountable? What do we do to make sure that we are actually moving things forward, so that next year, even though it'll seem like 12 months have passed quickly, that we actually are accountable to some of these goals that we're speaking about on this call?
I'll say, kind of just echoing what everybody has been saying about knowing your why, and outright stating what your goals are. So if you don't really have a goal that's concrete that you can meet, you can't really be held accountable for that. So we need to state what our goals are, in DEI and race and optometry. And then when we have calls like this, and in 12 months, we can say, this was our goal, and this is what we did, and this is what we didn't do. This is what we need to do better. So just having a concrete goal is a way that we can hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah, I like the idea of Dr. Ramsey calling out there. He'll say, we're not contacting him after we said we would, or something of that nature. So making it very clear is something I really like the idea of.
Dr. Shoga?
how do we hold each other accountable? I think this is part of that accountability project. And I think honestly, keeping in touch throughout the year and not just annually. I love that we do share, kind of a snapshot of what we've been able to do in the course of the year. But in terms of actually being accountable, checking in and, asking what have you done to, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. And were you able to accomplish that? And if not, what are the resources needed? Whether it be human resources or financial resources, or just sometimes brainstorming. Sometimes you just need to have a good old-fashioned brainstorming session with people. So, I think being able to keep in contact throughout the year would help with accountability, to be honest. And if anyone on this call wants to take the lead in making sure that we keep touch throughout the year, quarterly, that could be a start. That is actually what accountability would look like. And providing the help and for everybody that has an idea, being a leader for that idea as well. It's not a closed system. I think anybody who wants to be involved in helping can and should be involved, because then that helps all of us to stay accountable to each other.
Dr. Hurd, any thoughts on accountability?
Yes, thank you. I think we have to be willing to submit to each other. That's the bottom line. It's one of those things where you choose to do your part, and you say you're going to do such and so, and the other person says they're going to do whatever it is they're going to do. And you have to be able to come back to the group and say what you're doing or what you've done, and also say what you haven't done. And if someone has something to say that, may make you feel a little awkward, then so be it. You just have to be able, whatever the mission is, you just have to be able to deal with whatever comes so that the mission can be done. And I think a lot of times people just have very surface ideas about, what they want to do, how they want to be involved, what they want to believe in. And I think it's just really important when you say you're going to do something that you do it. Your word needs to be impeccable. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't even know what impeccable means. So they have no idea what their word is out there doing in the ethos. So I think you just have to be willing to come to a common place, and on some level, you have to submit to each other.
Dr. Geist, how do we hold each other and different organizations accountable?
I mean, I completely agree with everything that's been said. I mean, ditto to Dr. Hurd. It's one of those things when you've got, I like the peer pressure thing. And I think all of us are in this position for a reason, as far as in our respective groups. And I think that if we weren't, we wouldn't be in the position. So I think that, we've got personal accountability, and I think we've got in our own organizations accountability. And I think that, I think we've got to figure out what is it that we're trying to accomplish and our common goals, and probably get something a little bit more structured. Again, going back to the what's our why, and have some commonality of what each of our roles are. I think that would be a good place to start.
Agreed. Now, Dr. Ramsey, how do you think we hold people?
Thanks. I think this question kind of is a good one to end on, and a good one to have here. The one question I have to the question is, who are we accountable to? because we cannot be just a group of 10 people and 10 organizations accountable to each other. The students, that's like having the students in the classroom and say, everybody behave, and the students be accountable to each other, make sure everybody behave. There needs to be a teacher, there needs to be a principal, there needs to be somebody at the front. The question I have is, who are we accountable to? And if we do not do what we say, is there a consequence to not doing it? Because if there's no consequence for action, then why should we do it? I think we have to look within ourselves and say, okay, which one of these groups wants to be the leader that we have to be accountable to then say, hey, this is what we're doing for race and optometry. Not for everybody, this is what we are doing for this group. This is what we're doing for Hispanics. This is what we're doing for Black people. We have to have a direct focus, a direct thing. We can't make it general. We can't beat around the bush. We got to say, this is our goal. This is our mission, to reach Black students. And then say, this is what we're doing this year. And if that does not work, what am I going to do differently next year? I cannot do the same program I did for 50 years for the next 50 years if it did not work. It may be a good program. It may have good morals. But if the mission or the voice or the messaging is not reaching, maybe we change the message. Maybe we change the messenger. But we have to be held accountable to somebody, because otherwise we will continue doing the same thing, saying, look at me, I've done so much. Look, but you can run and run in place and go nowhere. And a lot of times we're running in place because we have nobody we're getting held accountable to. We can say we want to be held accountable, but there has to be somebody that you have to answer to. Well, I remember when I used to get my grades, my mom knew when report card season was coming. It was every quarter. It was there. Back in the day, we used to get a report card before Christmas. We didn't get it after the break. We used to get the report card. My report card came out before. My presents were determined on the report card. I didn't get the gifts, and then I got the report card in January, like they do it now, which sounds crazy to me. But I had to be held accountable to my mother to stand in front of her and say, this is why my grades were this, and this is what I'm going to do to pull it up for next quarter. Because I had a person to be held accountable to. I wasn't being held accountable to myself. And I think what we're missing is, who are we being held accountable to? And what are the consequences for inaction? What are the consequences for inactivity? What are consequences for misguided misjudgments, different things? We have to be able to say, even if we try, and it may be good intention, if it is not working, let us try something else. Let us be open to other people's ideas. Let us be open to other schools of thought so that we can actually move the conversation forward. And even if the new school of thought is not perfect and it doesn't get that, but let's try something else. But if it works, keep going. But if you look back and say it hasn't worked, let's try something else. But at the end of this, we talked about our why. We talked about, I want to leave us with who we're accountable to and who's going to stand up and say, I am willing to be the one to be the leader, and then who is going to follow the ones we're being accountable to. And until we can answer that, it's going to be very difficult for us not to have the same conversation for 10 years getting on here. I'm happy to have the conversation because that gives us a little meter stick to say, okay, what have we not done? But I would love for next year that we have something else to discuss, a whole different set of questions. And we get to a point where we don't want to have this conversation, because I don't really like getting worked up and talking about this stuff at nighttime. I want to go put my daughter down to bed, and she's looking at me over the computer right now like, Daddy, it's bedtime. So I would love for us not to have this conversation. Let's work ourselves out of a committee. Let's not be a committee that's here forever. Let's say, hey, the end goal is this, and I'm willing to roll up my sleeves so that I work myself out of a job, because I like other stuff more than this. I actually don't like talking about this. But if I have to, I will. But I think we just have to look at ourselves and look at our organizations. And I'm thankful for the organizations being on this call, because it's not the easiest thing to stand up here and have to be held accountable for something that you may not have started, you may not have done. I get it. So I'm thankful for people being on here. But I feel like we can do better, and we should do better. But we have to make some changes in how we're doing it so that we're not having the same talks over and over.
Now, I always prefer to pass the mic around so we can hear from everybody else, but I would like to take Dr. Ramsey up on his question and say who we are accountable to at the end of the day is our patients. And they are the ones who often will suffer or not suffer based on the way that we implement some of this change. Because the downstream effects are what we are really trying to work towards: health equity, trying to make sure that all voices and all vision is able to be preserved. And that leads into what I hope to pull up next. Betsy, if we're ready for it, we actually need to hear from some of our patients and see what they think about diversity and how it affects, and inclusion as well, how it affects their ability to be able to interact with healthcare.
Okay.
First of all, as a patient, I can share that oftentimes I find that providers can dismiss me, and I don't know if that's something implicit bias going on, but it's been unfortunate. I can remember instances as a child. I suffer from asthma, and I received inconsistent care for all my life. I grew up poor in New York City. My parents don't speak English, so it was always a challenge navigating healthcare. And I think that actually helped inspire me to become a social worker, so I could be an advocate and a voice for all.
I've been wearing glasses since I was 11 years old, and I've lived in 8 states, and I never had my first Black optometrist until 2 years ago. And it's so ironic that I met her for the first time while I was interviewing for my job here at Salis as their DEI officer. And the first time she walked out, I had no idea. I questioned if she was, well, actually my husband questioned if she was the doctor. She had beautiful locks all the way down to her waist. She had on skinny jeans and high top Converse tennis shoes. And he said, "Is that the doctor?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "How cool is that? Like, she looks like an everyday person and she looks like us."
You know, for me, it's been super important to have a diverse roster of doctors, and that's across race, across gender, across experience, across backgrounds, just because I feel like having people who look like me has been so helpful in feeling heard and feeling seen. I've had a few years where I've gone to several doctors in just a short amount of time, and my experience has been the doctors that look like me and understand my background have just sort of been advocating for me to advocate for myself.
Diversity is so important. Our patients should see themselves in the team. And I think also inclusion is important. I love patient advisory boards. They can be such a missing link to sort of including patients in the decision-making process. So there's that inclusion, that voice that we are listening, you're listening to us, and we feel like we matter. Even if we don't participate, knowing that that space is available could be so important.
As a Black woman, I've sought out a lot of Black women doctors. You know, some of my experiences with doctors that don't look like me is that sometimes they don't also identify things on my Black skin or that are happening with my Black hair because they just haven't seen it. A lot of the studies and the research just hasn't been on Black bodies. And so, you know, when you're looking these things up online, it's really hard to find them. And I've had experiences where I've gone to doctors that haven't worked as much with people of color and with Black people specifically, and have seen certain things and have misdiagnosed it because it looked like one thing on Caucasian skin that looked very different on my Black skin. So, you know, it's not to say that all of my doctors have to be Black and all of my doctors have to be women, but it does make me feel a lot more comfortable.
Let me say how proud I am to have you be my new optometrist. And I told her 8 states, glasses since I was 11, I'm 47 years old. I said, I've never had a Black optometrist. I said, I am having one proud auntie moment. And it's that important to me that I have her as my optometrist, and even more important that she is the optometrist to my 17-year-old daughter who wants to be a doctor, who has vision problems, and that I think she could be a great role model for, even without her trying to be a formal mentor. Just her presence alone really does matter.
So there you go. That's part of the end game, and that's who we want to be accountable to. So to end things off, I really want to give everybody the chance to say any final words, anything, so that we remember for next year when we have this conversation again, where we've left off on. And let's start things off with Dr. Marshall.
Yes, Dr. Harewood, you reminded us earlier that one of the ultimate goals is health equity. You know, so we all took an oath to keep our patients utmost at all times, which means providing the best quality care, irrespective of that patient's background, the color of their skin, the language they speak, etc. So in terms of accountability, ultimately, I think we are accountable to our patients. But I would also submit that I have to be accountable to myself first. I can't be accountable to anyone else until I'm accountable to myself. Because if I'm not, then I'm going to fail that next step. So I think it starts with each of us individually. And then from there, we need to extend that out to others. And we need to do that in every venue that we are engaged in.
Dr. Jones?
I really love the patient connection that we put in there. It's important. In our state, we have a listening board where the patients can call and talk to some of the state representatives, and it's an open forum. And I actually was part of that and was able to listen to. There were quite a few Black patients that were treated and mistreated by doctors, and they wanted to express themselves and say that this, we walked in, this happened, and I was hurt. They were like literally physically hurt and had to have some recourse. But these things are important because, again, the end game is great patient care. I spoke on implicit bias at the Academy meeting in the plenary session and specifically talked about how that people have that implicit bias sometimes and make mistakes and do things that they're uncomfortable with. And so on every level, we have to check ourselves and make sure that we are up to that level. Even with each other, we have implicit bias. And we found that if you take that Harvard implicit bias test, it doesn't mean a lot, but it does show you some things that you can't control. And those are interesting things that we need to know. So these are things that we need to work on as leaders ourselves, as well as teaching and working with other people. And again, just like Dr. Marshall said, keeping yourself accountable and whatever, spiritual belief you have, believing and walking in that.
Dr. Geist, any final words?
We just want to make sure that we continue to grow and make the opportunities in optometry as good as we can make it, and listen to the students that end up doing well or not doing well, and what we can do to make it better and give them the tools they need to succeed. We also are going to next summer in June, we're going to and hopefully have over 3,000 students come to DC for our optometries meeting. And we're going to absolutely try, and we've already been getting the word out to make sure that we get as many diverse students there as we can to get them engaged. Engagement is so important at that age and that point in their career to, understand what optometry does and just, again, engagement with their fellow students and understand what advocacy means at all that age or at all the time. So we're excited for that. And then, the other piece is just to make sure that inclusion piece that we met, it doesn't do us any good to get them into school and do all these things if we don't include them. And we have to always work for that throughout all of the profession and out of our professional lives. And so we just don't want to forget that piece, and we want to always maintain that piece. So that's it. Thank you.
Dr. Hurd?
I really liked Dr. Shoge's suggestion about us checking in periodically. That is something that I would like to do. So if you get a message from me in about 3 months, please don't ignore it. Just read it. And if you decide that you want to respond in some sort of way, then do so. Because like I said, I really believe the things that I say. And I can't say everybody believes everything they say. In fact, some people don't know what they're saying. And they just need to go, retreat and get out of our presence. But I think it's really important that we do continue to communicate with each other. That's really, really important. And I think we can strike up on other things, other topics or other things that may come up the more we interact with each other.
Dr. Shoge?
I will be looking for your email, Dr. Hurd, and I will be replying. I would encourage the folks who are in the audience, you're obviously part of the choir. And, a lot of times doing this work involves preaching to the choir, so to speak. So I include you in the choir. But, one of the requests that I would like to make is that when, the folks on this panel and other people who are not represented here today are doing the work, creating programs, doing webinars, showcasing people, the least you can do is show up. There's nothing worse than putting a lot of time and effort into something and not having people show up. So if you can show up, and again, I know you're part of the choir, so you're going to show up, but bring 2 friends who might not otherwise show up. So we can continue to feel encouraged to do this work, but also the message is spreading and it's going beyond just the people in the pew. It's reaching the people that need to hear the message so it can really take effect in the way that it needs to in order for the difference really to be seen and felt more broadly. So that is, I'm ending on a request. So that is my request to those in the audience.
Dr. Ramsey, any last words?
I'm happy that we're getting together. I'm happy to have this talk. But my last words are my challenge to the people in the audience, not just the ones on the panelists, because most of the panelists and people that are on here are doing the work, right? So the conversations that we're having here isn't really about the people on the panel. It's the people watching. And my challenge to the people watching is all the work doesn't have to be done by Black and brown people. All the work does not have to be done by us, because at the end of the day, most of the people in power are not Black and brown. The ones that are controlling what's going on are not us. So at the end of the day, the people that actually have to do the work that's going to be impactful ain't going to be Black and brown people. Because I can scream and say the most eloquent thing ever. But if somebody else that's in power does not actually make an action, does not do something, then we're speaking to the choir. It doesn't matter. I challenge the ones that are listening that may look back at this and say, what am I going to do differently tomorrow? What am I going to do differently next week? How am I going to get involved? Because if diversity matters, and you hear those patients talk about, I've never seen somebody that look like me be my eye doctor and get that connection with somebody. What will we do to allow more Black and brown people to get into schools? Is it only OAT scores? Is it only GPA? Is there anything else about a person or about their character that can show you how good of a student they can be when you're choosing who's going to be on your board and this, that, and the other? I know you have rules. You have to go this and you have to do that. But if you look back and say, it'll be 20 years before we have somebody on our board that's Black because of the rules we have in place, maybe you change the rules. Maybe you make some exceptions, because I don't want to wait 20 years to see those people in those positions so that we can have the impact that needs to be had. So the ones that are in power that may not look like us, that may not necessarily understand the work that we're doing now, I challenge you to look in the mirror and say, what can I do differently? How can I change the rules? How can I make it? It don't got to be fair. It ain't got to be favor. It's got to be right. And if it's the right thing to do, if you can stand up there and say, this is the right thing to do, I'm putting this person in this position here, and we're making a presidential seat and whatever, because I want to hear their voice at every single meeting from today on. You, the president, make a decision. Stand up there and say, this is what I'm doing, because it's the right thing to do. So I challenge the ones that are listening and watching and saying, what am I going to do differently tomorrow? What kind of conviction am I going to have to make a difference, so I don't have to wait 10, 20 years to make a difference in the organizations that I'm in? Even if the people in what doesn't look like you, I challenge you to do that and become the advocate, because that's where we're really going to make a difference, is when people that don't look like me actually become the advocate, and I don't have to do the talking. I get to just say amen. And that's when we are truly going to be making a difference, when we can have no Black people on this call talking about what we're doing to change race in optometry. That's when we've really moved the needle, and that's when we've moved it forward. When other people say it's important to have Black people in optometry, if it's only Black people saying it, it's not really important. We need the other ones to come up and have that same passion and conviction to say that matters enough to me. I'm excited for what we're doing. I just know we can do better. I hold myself accountable more than I hold anybody else accountable. Before I wag my finger at anybody, I look back and say, what have I done? So I think we need to, if we all do that, I think next year when we're talking, we'll be able to laugh and smile at going from 4 to 5% and 6%, and we'll all be happy.
Dr. Anyama.
I just wanted to echo everyone and say, thank you everyone for participating in this panel, and it's been a great discussion. My term is about to end, so I think for myself, at least holding myself accountable, is to continue to be active in increasing diversity efforts in optometry, even though I'm no longer going to be the NOSA president. Most of us eventually are not going to be in the positions that we're in. So we just have to make sure that we continue to advocate for people like us to continue to be in optometry, even after we're no longer the leaders in our respective organizations. So.
Now, we started with easy, we're going to end with easy before we go to Dr. Heath for final comments. So any final comments, panel?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for having me here. And then I also just want to direct my closing statements to the students and just ask for results-oriented accountability on the AOSA's part and my part. And then additionally saying, just if you're a student, don't play small. You never know what impact you could have from just expressing how you feel. I said this to the board last week, but it's true. You might not think you know, but you feel it, and that's good enough. So bring it. And even if you have to bring it, email me. We'll find a way to make it work and make something positive come from it. So thank you all for having me here.
So my distinct thanks to all the panelists, and I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Heath to close the night.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of the panelists for, I think, a tremendous conversation. I would like to share a couple of observations, because even though the discussion was focused on accountability, and I think all the organizations have certainly undertaken a number of initiatives and made progress, accountability is what the conversation seemed to stumble over. How do we make sure we get to where we want to go? And it's interesting, Dr. Anyama, and I'm sorry, Aneta, Anyeta, I'll get it right. Said my term is over. And I think that that's one of the issues that many of our associations challenge. The presidency of the AOA is 1 year. The presidency of ASCO is 1 year. I guess the presidency of the NOA is 2 years. You know, and although we can look to individual leadership to be a strong voice on DEI issues, ultimately it really is the culture, the values, and the collective priorities of organizations that have to embed DEI as part of their DNA. So I look as an example, ASCO just approved a new strategic plan with 10 priorities. 2 of those priorities are DEI priorities. We're actually doing something quite similar at SUNY. You know, we have a diversity master plan and we're now integrating it fully into our institutional master plan. So at some point, the organizations have to become, I don't want to say independent of the leader's voice. You know, we always need a leader's voice. But ultimately, when a leader leaves, it is the organization that picks the next leader. You know, and it needs to look for leaders that are as committed, you know, as the former. So when I do think about this long-term challenge, you know, and Dr. Ramsey's wish that it was, you know, all white people on this panel talking about it so he could go play with his daughter. I'm afraid we're always going to need, you know, the experiences and the voices of people of color to be one of the measures of our success. So perhaps maybe Adam, it can be a little more blended. You know, I don't know that it's good to be all people of color and all white people, but perhaps a blend of those. So I guess I would encourage everybody to sort of think within their organizations of how to embed. And I'm sorry, I'm a planner. I'm a guy who likes metrics. I like outcomes and I like accountability. Joy's bouncing her head up and down. You know, and one of the ways in which we may know our roles relative to one another is by understanding what our priorities and what are the metrics that our organizations use to determine success on this issue. So, you know, there's a part of me that flashed partway through the conversation of, gee, maybe we need to have a DEI annual report for the profession, you know, that really sort of looks at all of the organizations and shared metrics, you know, in terms of how we're really doing. So, you know, great conversation, a lot of emphasis on shared responsibility, common commitments, working together, the importance of voices, you know, but I do hope, Dr. Ramsey, that, you know, next year, and, you know, we'll think about inviting you back. Next year, you know, perhaps, you know, we can get a little meatier in terms of what are the true indicators of success. So, you know, those are just my observations. I thought it was a great conversation, and I just want to thank all of the panelists for participating tonight.
With that, thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening.